did you have a question?
Yeah, Wayne Gers from Clean MPG, and this one's for Robert. Out of all the stuff we talked today, if it was supply demand on fuels or vehicles or chemicals or whatever else you want to put into a vehicle of any sort to get from point A to point B, I never heard anything about possibility of shrink instead of growth throughout the world because of the cost of all of this stuff increasing, because it looks like we are coming in supply-demand constraints on any number of fronts. And if vehicles start to begin, costing 60 grand, or fuel at 10 bucks a gallon, we might be heading towards Europe, where all of a sudden we just don't need them anymore. And the 3-car garage for a 1-car family might be a thing of the past. Could you comment on that?
I think we've already kind of hit an inflection point on a lot of that consumption in the U.S. I think there's been this last recession, and talking with friends of mine in the car business, I think there's been a kind of a fundamental mental shift, and not in a lot of consumers. I'm not going to say everyone, but that downsizing, not buying that bigger house, not buying a bigger car. And I think that's reflected in some of the projections on energy. It's partly the aging of the American population. But again, back to my earlier point, I don't see it's not so much about the U.S. anymore. It's the lesson of what was the lesson of Copenhagen? It was the Indians and the Chinese saying, we are not going to reduce our CO2 emissions. I mean, Rajendra Pachauri, who's the head of the IPCC, said, we have 400 million people in India who don't have electricity. You think we're not going to use coal in India? You're crazy. So I take your point, but I think it's not. It's a global issue now, and it's an interdependent issue. So I agree with your point about the U.S., but I think we're in the wake now in terms of this.
Well, another point about the price of gasoline, it's kind of corollary, I guess, and that is there is, when you run the numbers, there is a dollars per gallon value of gasoline where small battery PHEV vehicles are cost effective. Depending on whose numbers you look at, it's somewhere between $5 and $10 a gallon. Those prices are not out of the question at all. When we hit that value, we need to re-examine these kinds of electric vehicles, and it might really be the next big thing, if in fact we get to these price points, right?
Sure.
And that's up for debate, right? But it's entirely possible. And there's an argument for vehicle manufacturers to hedge their bet against this kind of price increase only on this potential, right?
Allison?
Yes.
Over here.
Voice.
To your left. Way left.
Got it. Thank you.
Could I ask, I mean, these are great automotive experts out here. So I'd like to ask a question by raise of hands. How many of you think we're ever going to see a 16 million car a year market in this country ever again? So, okay, in the next 20 years.
Interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Okay, so that was about 8 or 10. What about 13? That's I want to see all those hands up and a few more. Okay. Well, what's it going to be this year?
12.
10? Oh, 12? Okay.
I was thinking 11 or 10.
John, what do you think? Huh? Okay. Yeah, interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, on the metals, both the lanthanides and platinum, is there any possibility we'll see a repeat of what happened with catalytic materials? I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, the amount of precious metal required for automotive emissions control was dramatically more, and over time, there are synthetic substitutes that have been developed. So in the case of the lanthanides, I'd have to assume there are some clever chemical companies out there that see this as a massive source of revenue if they can come up with viable alternatives. Same thing with the reference to fuel cell, PEM cells. I know Honda, GM, they keep, they're feeling very, positive about the sharp reduction in required precious metal content for their stacks. So could we see some breakthroughs in both cases for the metals to find some substitutes, synthetic substitutes?
The breakthroughs are happening, right? There was a fantastic result, iron only, last year for oxygen reduction catalysis. Really remarkable. Of course, it wasn't stable for the number of hours that we needed to be for insertion into an actual PEM environment. But there was another one, PDOT, it's a polymeric material, also very functional as a catalyst. And what you said, I think, is exactly right. It's a decadal thing. It's a 2 or 3 decade kind of insertion point. So we take a couple of interesting, promising lab scale results right now. Yeah, I think it's going to happen. But I don't know if it's going to happen in a time frame that's going to be commensurate with the way that we need to also have the concurrent infrastructure evolve, right? So I don't know. It's chicken or egg thing in some ways as far as selling this whole thing, platinum-wise, hydrogen-wise. And we need to have both sides to really make a compelling argument. And I think it's going to be a while before we have a low enough platinum content, hugely scaled solution. I think it's possible. It's going to happen, I'm sure. But
For the rare earth metals, is anything happening in terms of synthetic replacements or alternatives?
I mean, to be honest with you, I can't answer that. I guess my stock response would be something on price and technology are incredibly powerful drivers. And price of crude gets high enough, you get a lot more drilling. And if the price of the lanthanides gets high enough, you're going to see a lot of chemists involved in trying to reduce the content of neodymium, praseodymium, all these rare earths, and because they'll have no choice. It's an accident of it is an accident of geology that the Chinese have these clays that are very high in rare earths. No, not the only place, but their ore bodies in China, as I understand it, are among the highest value, the richest ores. But Molycorp claims that their ore body content, their ore content is about 9%, and that's the key issue for them, as their CTO explained to me the other day. You have to start with a rich ore body, because if you don't, then the problem of big numbers, the tyranny of big numbers, really starts to kick the economics of it pretty hard.
But just when somebody else actually has a large supply and tells the Chinese, well, you can screw us as long as you can, but the day will come and you're gone.
Well, and one other part of the business issue with the lanthanides and the Chinese is, okay, so say Molycorp gets up and running, and they're going to have to raise a lot more money. So will Arafura Resources and Lynas and these other companies that want to get into this market. And so say they begin producing lanthanides and start selling them on the market, the Chinese could say, well, we're just not really crazy about competition, and undercut their price.
Right.
Then it means everybody buys cheaper.
Well, right, but we go back to single source supplier, and then the Chinese say, well, we don't have any competitors anymore. Guess what? We just doubled the price.
Robert, what about Brazil? What about Brazil? Don't they have a lot of ore?
Not that I know of.
yeah, so yeah, I comment. So Chile and Bolivia have a tremendous amount of lithium, not to be confused with lanthanum. And in fact, recently Korea announced that they were going to develop or try to scale lithium removal from seawater. There's actually a fair amount of lithium salts dissolved in the oceans. We don't have a shortage of lithium on this planet. Lithium carbonate is very, very plentiful. And it is, none of the major battery manufacturers are concerned about lithium right now. And I recently met with SQM Lithium. They're one of the major producers. They produce some 30 or 40% of the worldwide lithium carbonate right now. And they have to shut down capacity. They're concerned because they can't sell at the price they want. And they're down to, for high quality, they're down to under $5 a kilogram right now, which is a pretty low cost considering in a kilowatt hour of battery, you don't have much more than 2 kilograms of lithium. So a $1,000 unit of battery has roughly $8 of lithium carbonate in it. So we're relatively price insensitive right now to the cost of lithium carbonate. If you consider what we pay at a pack level for the energy storage versus the commodity, we can tolerate a 2 or 3 time increase in lithium carbonate without blinking. And that takes us to seawater removal of lithium carbonate almost. So I'm not worried about that at all.